Welcome back to the year in review episode, our penultimate episode. We got one more to go. You can imagine what that one's going to be. But we're touching on the defensive backs. A lot to get to here, just because of the movement in the room, the amount of bodies just in the room right now. It was year one for John Butler, who after a 1 year stint as a defensive backs coach is now the defensive coordinator for Nebraska. Addison Williams is the new defensive backs coach, leading the room. Inbound, you've got Andrew Marshall, you've got uh, Jameer Khan from Southern Illinois, and you've got Justin Rhett from Georgia. Those are the three transfer portal additions to the room. You've got Bryson Weber from the high school ranks, Tanner Church from the high school ranks. I feel like I'm forgetting another DB. Um,
I mean, you just got a lot of names, Tim.
Yeah, a lot of names.
This
So
is a
yeah,
pretty
exactly.
huge
Just
room.
kind of where we're at. We've got a big room. So we'll dive right into it. Outbound, I guess we'll talk outbound names. Tommy Hill off to the NFL draft. Isaac Gifford off to the NFL draft. Deshaun Singleton off to the NFL draft, most likely, unless he somehow decides to potentially pursue a fifth year. But more than likely, he is gone to the next stage of his career. Marquez Buford decided to come back for another season. That's a veteran, an important veteran coming back. Any names I'm forgetting that are outbound, Steve?
Yeah, just reserve players. Kobe Brad's hit the transfer portal. Dwight Boodle hit the transfer portal, but those are the only ones. And so the spring is going to be an incredibly important period for figuring out the roster and figuring out this defensive backs room under Addison Williams in his first year. And then also John Butler has an idea of he wants in the defensive back end now that he is DC. So yeah, there is just a lot of names. Let's start out with the corner spot, Tim. Just Sierra Wright, he really showed me something this past season. I did not expect him to step up to step into the program in like July or August, whenever he got here, and perform the way he did. He performed really, really, really well, almost at like an all conference level. At times, as just like that straight up cover corner who is really sticky in coverage, what I really liked was we knew that his coverage ability was there, but like when you watched him at USC, you didn't really see that physicality, that ability, or that want to get down and dirty and help out, run support and tackle. Well, he did. He in
And he was
Nebraska,
blitzing this year, and he was
yeah,
good at it.
he was cat blitzing off the edge. He was knocking the ball out of at a quarterback's hands. He was doing a lot of physicality type stuff, and I really liked that about him. And it just kind of showed his willingness and his determination to make something out of the move to Nebraska. And so he's coming back. He's supposed to be coming back, and he's going to be your corner one. Out there, cornerback one out there. You mentioned Andrew Marshall, the transfer from Idaho, one of the best defensive backs in the FCS last year. I mean, he has potential. I talked to him over the phone. He said the pitch from Nebraska was, "Hey, come in and be that starting corner opposite of Sierra Wright." So I think that's what Andrew Marshall has in his head coming over, and I really like Andrew Marshall. We can talk about his game against Oregon, how well he performed there. But other corners expected to return: Bly Hill, Jeremiah Charles, Amari Sanders, Larry Tarver, Bryson Weber. You mentioned he's coming in the 2025 class as a true freshman. Bryce Turner, Jameer Khan, who's got plenty of fight and grit in him. So yeah, it's a lot of names in these in this corner room, but you kind of like what you have in Sierra Wright. It's going to be fun to see what he does in 2025 in his second season at Nebraska, second season under John Butler too, first season with Addison Williams, the position coach. But yeah, Sierra Wright and then that battle of that starting corner position opposite of Sierra Wright is going to be really fun to watch. My pick right now is Andrew Marshall, but we'll see. There's some safety bodies that could potentially help out at corner too. We all know what Donovan Jones. I'm not sitting here and saying a second year Donovan Jones is going to be out here outplaying some of these guys, but I didn't think it was half bad out there with him as a corner,
Not at
a big
all.
bodied corner doing a lot of stuff in the bowl game against Boston College. So Donovan Jones is he's always intrigued me, and so it was really fun to see him out there. But yeah, Tim, let's just like narrow it down to corners here. What do you think? What did you see from them this past season? Obviously, Tommy Hill with his plantar fascia just never quite got over that and was playing hurt. And maybe he shouldn't even been on the field during during some games. USC notably comes to mind.
Yeah, you and me said this at points during the season. I just felt bad about the way it all
Yeah,
went. He came back
that
for another
sucks.
year.
Hmm.
Was hoping to, came in with a lofty draft stock. Was hoping to improve it. The bright spot of his season came against Colorado. He had a good day
Hmm.
against the Buffaloes. But then yeah, it's just the injury couldn't really get over it, and you could tell when they tried to get him run against Illinois, and he kind of got picked on, and he just
Yeah.
wasn't the same player, just in the sense that it's tough on that injury to turn and run, to play everything backwards like a corner, like you're supposed to play with the athleticism that he has. He was just clearly a step down athletically dealing with that injury, and that's enough at that position to take you from potentially, top 3 round pick to at times unplayable. And that's tough. That's just kind of
Yeah.
unfortunate. And so I hope he gets the opportunity here in this offseason, whether I think he's playing the Senior Bowl. But in whichever bowl he ends up playing in, just to showcase his talent, gets the combine to be healthy and showcase once again why he was at one point considered a top 3 round pick. And it was a tough deal for Nebraska because the expectation, how much better is this year if they have Sierra Wright and Tommy Hill out there full strength all season?
Yeah.
You think that Illinois game for one probably goes a lot different if you have two potential NFL type guys out at corner playing at a high level all season.
UCLA too.
UCLA goes a little differently because you can
Hmm.
trust those guys on islands, and you could tell the idea from Tony White and from the defensive staff was to place their DBs on islands because they had a Tommy Hill out there, because they had a Sierra Wright out there, but then Tommy Hill wasn't out there, and it sucked. It
Hmm.
hurt Nebraska this year. And just talking straight corners, Steve, how did you feel about how they addressed the position in Tommy's absence? Because it was somewhat of a rotating group. You had
Hmm.
Marquez Buford out there at times. You had Malcolm Hartzog out there at times. They tried to get Bly Hill out there, but he was obviously dealing with some injuries. We saw rotational snaps from Amari Sanders
Jeremiah
late in the year.
Charles didn't
Jeremiah
go well.
Charles did not go well. Yeah, and so yeah, and then at the end of the year, Donovan Jones gets the call in the
Yeah.
bowl game, which I thought was fascinating considering some of the other names in that room.
Yeah, he leapfrogged all of them and did well out there. So he's one to definitely keep an eye on. But when you're thinking about the corners and what they needed to add, they needed an older veteran corner to come in, and that's Andrew Marshall from FCS Idaho. He was a Vandal over there for 2 seasons. He had a breakout sophomore campaign. He started his career as a nickel and played a lot of rotation snaps as a true freshman 2 seasons ago. He transitions into more of an outside corner role this past season in 2024 and does really well. Yeah, I'm just excited about the potential of a Sierra Wright and Andrew Marshall pairing at corner because I think it's a potentially good one. Now we're going to have to wait and see what Andrew Marshall looks like against Big Ten competition, but just judging from what I've seen, and Tim, you can talk about it more after from his tape against from his tape with Idaho is I think he's a really strong cover corner. He's bringing physicality too, and if you're going to be a corner in the Big Ten, you need to stick your nose in the fan, be tough, and tackle ball carriers. And Andrew Marshall showed that at the FCS level. I'm sure he's going to show it at the FBS level and the Power Conference level. So, yeah, and we're gonna have to wait and see with Bly Hill. I was really high on him coming in. I was just really intrigued just because of the size and length and being 6'4" and turning and flipping his hits and running with receivers. But that knee injury in the spring game just was maybe devastating. Just he was looking like this. He was going to be a starting corner opposite Tommy Hill, and then he was just like had to start all over with that knee injury. So that's super super tough. Jeremiah Charles, not sure what to think there. But he's still with the program, so we'll just have to wait and see how he develops. But then Amari Sanders, Larry Tarver, those are names that are really intriguing, but we just don't know a lot about him because they haven't played a ton of snaps. But that top two of Sierra Wright and Andrew Marshall is something I'm going to be keeping my eye on. I'm really glad that the program went out and got a veteran corner with experience and high level experience of doing very well. He was very, very highly touted. Andrew Marshall was in the transfer portal. He took a visit to Nebraska. He took a visit to Miami. He pulled the trigger on the Huskers and committed to them. If he didn't do that, he told me he was going to go to take a visit to Texas A&M too. So those are good programs that are that are looking for talent in the transfer portal and wanted Andrew Marshall, but Nebraska won out. So I'm excited about the potential pairing of Sierra Wright and Andrew Marshall.
Yeah, I think both of the corner additions, Jameer Khan as well, both guys are kind of making the jump up to Power Four football. But you like the traits you see on tape. Marshall a little more proven just because of how many different teams he's played. Played up against Oregon, played up against some true Power Four talent across his time at Idaho, and held up well, like you said. And
Mm-hmm.
I know those numbers don't always look good per PFF, but you watch the tape. The tape looks a lot better than the numbers do.
Yeah.
And that Oregon tape is good for him. I again said it on radio. Uh, I've watched Evan Stewart since high school. Since sophomore year of high school, junior year of high school. Play
Mm-hmm.
7-on-7, play on the field. I've seen like a handful of people go stride for him on a route.
Yeah.
And Andrew Marshall did that a few times against Stewart in that Oregon
Mm-hmm.
game, and that's impressive. That's one of those things where he's not just a really good athlete, Stewart. He's a nuanced route runner that understands timing really well, understands how to create separation, and it didn't matter to Marshall, who got beat a couple of times. They went back and forth, but stuck his nose in there and held up in one-on-one coverage against one of the more athletic receivers I've ever been around. So,
Mm-hmm.
really high on Andrew Marshall and what he brings, and I think this room improves with his addition. And that's kind of like the tale of the room right now. Is again, even with him though, it's a lot of unproven guys. You can go look at the
Yeah.
safety room as well. It's a lot of, hey, these guys are good athletes. These guys have individual traits that you like, but it's relatively unproven against the Big Ten, against Power Four talent. So, kind of on that note, Steve, kind of looking and transitioning to the safety room, they needed to get more athletic. You and me, all multiple times this year, kind of felt like when the defense collapsed, when they had issues, it ultimately fell on just lack of athleticism in the back end of the defense. We saw that pop up against Illinois. We saw that pop up against Colorado. We saw that pop up against USC and UCLA. And it was Wisconsin as well, where it's just, hey, in one-on-one matchups, and when you're asking these guys to play on islands, the safeties
Mm-hmm.
just couldn't. The safeties just couldn't at times, and it felt at times as well in coverage. It's like, hey, I don't know if these are the guys you want out there playing your deep third of the defense, playing your essentially your center field. You have better athletes on the roster. Those guys just didn't have the experience to do it. So I understand, having to trot out Isaac Gifford and Deshaun Singleton out there again and again. And those guys played well. And it's not to say those guys had bad years by any means. I thought there were good moments from all of those, from both those guys. And Nebraska doesn't have the year they have without both of those guys' veteran leadership. But there were some rough moments from both of those guys as well.
Yeah, the tackling in space really kind of struggled and it came, it reared its ugly head in really important times during the season and during games. So that was kind of hard to watch. But yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty obvious that the coaching staff, John Butler, and then Addison Williams, a new DB coach, they like you said, they needed to get more athletic back there, and they needed to find some new bodies. So I'm Marquise Buford is coming back. Malcolm Hartzog is coming back. Mario Buford saw rotation snaps, some backup snaps during the season. Caleb Benning is obviously one to keep an eye on. Donovan Jones, we'll see where he plays. I know he played a lot of corner against Boston College, but I always kind of think he's going to stick at safety or be a potential rover down the road. We'll see. But yeah, it's going to be with Isaac Gifford moving on, with Deshaun Singleton moving on. Those are two kind of long time defensive starters in the past 2 seasons. So it's going to be like some new faces out there, and it's going to be interesting to see who rises to the top and kind of takes the next step in their development and get some playing time. And Justin Rhett is an interesting one that they went out and got in the portal from Georgia. I don't know a ton about him. He didn't play a whole lot, but I think he comes from powerhouse program out on the West Coast in Bishop Gorman. So we'll see what he can bring. But I don't know. It's just the safety spot is really kind of an interesting one to me because did they get more athletic through the transfer portal this year? I don't know. It's going to be, I don't know who really kind of stands out right now just because there's a lot of names, a lot of young names, a lot of unproven names. So, I mean, Tim, what do you think about What do you see from the safety position right now? Because
Yeah,
when I look at it right now, you got your veterans in Buford and Hartzog, and I'm sure they're going to play a lot. But behind them, who else is contending for their snaps? I mean, who else you got here?
yeah, it feels like when you look at the rest of the room or the rest of the rooms and some of the other position battles that are coming up in the spring, you have an idea of who the favorites could be. This feels
Mm-hmm.
like open competition. Like again, the Donovan Jones,
Yeah,
his play at corner that throws everything off for me because I'm like, that's a guy that I
me
thought was going
too.
to be a safety and I thought
Uh-huh.
could contend for playing time at safety here in 2025, but he played corner and he played it well. So is that just more of like a hey, he was the best in the moment, but long term is still a safety, or
Mm-hmm.
is he moving down to corner? I think personally, just kind of where the rooms are at, I think you move him back to safety, potentially give him
Yes.
some run at one of
Mm-hmm.
those safety spots, and I think he's earned the opportunity. I think Caleb Benning's another fascinating name out there. Braylon Prude, both those guys intrigue me just with what they can do athletically, their football IQ. Caleb specifically, his IQ and kind of his understanding of the game. And depending on where he's at in terms of his recovery from his injury, Caden Vermas is a true freshman. They talked about him being a future rover. He's a better athlete than Isaac Gifford is. Can turn and run. Is a legit 4-4 guy. Has track speed. Can do some things athletically as well. So, is he a guy that potentially contends for that rover spot? I think if you're looking, talking about favorites, I think Ramir Stewart has to be the favorite just because he was on the two deep all year. And when we did see him, he flashed. Um, but I don't know. Ramir Stewart at Rover feels like a name to keep an eye on. But that other safety spot, like you said, is it going to be just Buford and Hartzog? I
Yeah,
think
I don't
Buford's
know.
out there. I think Buford's out there for sure. But is
Yeah,
Hartzog's job up for debate, up for competition? I mean, he led the team in interceptions, but I feel like there were
he was
more
also
times than
picked on
not.
a whole lot.
Oh, a whole lot. That's a guy
Mm-hmm.
that, again, you don't want him necessarily on an island,
Yeah.
but you like what he can do in coverage at times, just not one on one with faster receivers or bigger receivers, and that kind of limits. You kind of firmly pegged it to something he can do.
Yeah, the USC game I think was kind of maybe exposed Malcolm a little bit just because, of their receiving core and what they had, like size, length, speed. They were just like USC had some dudes, and obviously Malcolm Hartzog didn't really do well in that situation. And he was also put in some tough situations as well, one on one. And that's just kind of how Tony White played defense with those safeties kind of acting as nickel corners. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I don't think anybody has any answers right now. I agree with you, Tim, that Marquise Buford is probably going to be out there a whole lot. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a competition to with all these young guys to get in there. I keep bringing up Justin Rhett. They brought him in for a reason, and he obviously had flashed talent at the high school level, enough talent to get him, at Georgia. But yeah, Ramir Stewart, at Rover, I always liked watching him play just because he's a thumper, he's a downhill thumper. He kind of reminded me a little bit of a smaller Deshaun Singleton a little bit. So yeah, the Rover is going to be interesting. Braylon Prude, Kamir Prescott, Evan Taylor, all these names that I don't know are if they're going to be around for fall camp, but uh, it's just a very interesting conversation with a lot of these names, and the competition for snaps is going to be fierce.
I'm very interested. I think this is the position battle that is the most up in the air for me. And I think one that is going to get a lot of different names thrown in there. Here's a wild card for you. I know he's in the
Hassan
corner
McCullough.
room right now. Larry Tarver,
Yeah.
safety.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think Larry Tarver finds a role somewhere in the secondary. I think Amari Sanders does as well. But I kind of like Tarver more at safety, but I'm mean, health's a big thing for him. He kind of battled through some things as a freshman. Yeah, I this is a room that I think is going to have a lot to um, figure out here this spring. Addison Williams has a handful in terms of
Yeah.
developing. Justin Rhett, you mentioned just that addition. Again, they wanted to get more athletic. Hypothetically, they did, just in the sense that he is a better athlete than some of the others in the room, and a better athlete than some of the guys that were on the field last year. But he's very unproven. He hasn't played in
Very.
he hasn't played at Georgia, and he kind of missed some time even as a senior at Bishop Gorman because of injury. So, you know,
And he's
raw,
another one with size too, like six
yeah.
foot one, 200 pounds as he was listed at Georgia. So he's another safety body that could potentially be a rover. But yeah, I mean,
Is he a guy
we're
that,
talking
yeah,
about all these names, Tim. It's just like we don't know, and I'm sure the
right.
program has an
Right.
idea. Like
And where are you
Addison
at in
Williams,
terms of right? Obviously, we have a transition at the position coach, but where are you at in terms of the development? Like, obviously, the older guys are the older guys, and I don't put that on John Butler having those guys, Gifford and Singleton and Hartzog specifically out there again and again, and kind of some of the lapses in coverage we saw, the missed tackles. I don't necessarily put that on him. Again, when you're grading a young coach, especially one that joined so recent, like he joined what, a month before fall camp, essentially, a
yeah,
weeks before fall camp. I kind of judge him based on the play of the younger guys because those are the guys that he developed and worked with. And I thought the development of Sierra Wright was a good bonus in Butler's direction. I thought again the development of Donovan Jones and some of these guys. Where are you at faith wise in his ability to get this room, him and Addison Williams, in getting this room ready to play?
yeah. So John Butler obviously he knows football. He's spent like the past before this past year 10 years in the NFL. We all know what he did with the Buffalo Bills and how well respected he is in NFL coaching circles. So him as a football coach, like I have no, um I have nothing bad to say about that. But coming from the NFL and then coaching professionals and stepping down and coaching kids out of high school, college kids, it's a change. And I think he talked about that during several times during the course of the season in interviews where he said that he had to change his coaching style to fit college kids, which is different than talking to like a 10-year professional or 8-year professional in the NFL. So I think having that 1 year under his belt and now transitioning to the defensive coordinator role, I think he's going to have a better idea of how to you know just kind of spread out his time and maybe I think Matt Rule said that it took him some time to maybe figure out who to coach and not worry about the entire room and just focus on the guys who were out there. And so I think it was a learning experience for John Butler, just like it was always going to be. He was in a tough spot. He inherited who he inherited, and he just showed up before fall camp. So it was all kind of a tough situation, but when it comes to his football mind, I don't think there's really anybody better defensively on the staff, just because of where he came from in the NFL. And it's just I think he's gonna have to figure out a better way to maybe teach the younger guys. And I think that he was aware of that and everything. So I think that's going to be an important kind of deal with him is learning to coach and kind of connect with the younger kids and not make it seem like he's talking with 10 professionals with 10 years in the NFL.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I'm interested to see how that transition works for him. But I think something to be, if you want some positivity here, as we close this thing out, Addison Williams did a lot of good work with kind of raw defensive backs that developed into guys that can truly cover and truly hit at UCF. I thought he did a really good job of bringing in like kind of blank canvases in the sense that like just really good athletes that didn't really know what they were doing and then developing them into like good solid pieces in coverage down at UCF. So you hope he can do the same in Nebraska. Obviously has some Florida ties. Expect him to be kind of working with a bunch of those guys in those rooms and trying to turn that room around. Yeah, I there's a lot of unknown here, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe they make another addition or two in the safety room, but at this point, I think this is who the room is. And yeah, a lot of bodies, a lot of names. I mean, the other thing too is with so many different like it's so many different. It's not like they have a bunch of Caleb Bennings. They have a bunch of Braylon Prudes. Like it's a bunch of different looking and different acting players.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your Braylon Prudes that are big jumbo athletes. That can do a lot of different things, but are pretty football raw. Then you have a Caleb Benning who relatively average size, maybe even undersized by some, but super smart, has a football IQ, knows what he's doing out there, just pound for pound, a really good football player. You have your Larry Tarvers and your Amari Sanders, guys that can just straight up just cover, natural in coverage, super like instinctual, very technically sound. And you've got a good mix of just different size. You got to see Air Wright, who's pretty average size, but has some length in his limbs. Jameer Khan, similar type of player, similar frame. Um, it's just a lot to work with. So you have to think, five good DBs can emerge from this group. You already have three of them. You already have three, somewhat starters or established veterans, but you need
Yeah.
two more to emerge. You would think there's enough in there in this room, and maybe they get back to what they did in year one, which is rotating a lot more in that room.
Yeah, I mean that would help just in case somebody, falls off the cliff or something, gets hurt middle of the season, isn't performing well. That makes a change easier. We didn't really see a whole lot of change in the defensive back end at Nebraska throughout the season. It was always kind of just those veterans at the safety and rover spot. So yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting. I kind of just seems like out of all the positions right now on the team, defensive back and those safeties especially is kind of like the biggest one of like who's going to play. Because Marquise Buford, he has the experience, he has the knowledge. He's played college football for a long time, but can he get leapfrogged? I mean, it's just stuff like that that I'm wondering about with some of these young guys who lack experience but don't lack talent. So I'm just excited to see who comes out on top. Spring ball is just going to be incredibly important for everybody. But like when talking about just the safeties and the corners, it's going to be fun to watch.
For sure. And with these roster restrictions and everything, it's like it's do or die time for some of these guys where it's like, hey, you got to
NFL
earn.
minicamp.
Yep. Like I said, you got
Mhm.
to earn, your way to the two deep, or you might be hitting the portal, man. Like
Yeah.
it might be, you might have to go find opportunity elsewhere. So, yeah, but we could see some wild cards emerge. This staff loves to keep their cards close to chest, but also likes to turn over every possible rock they can to find talent. So, maybe
Mhm.
there's a wild card name we're not even discussing that emerges as like a real two deep guy at in the secondary. Who knows? But
It's gonna be like a Donovan Jones showing up at corner in the bowl game. It's like, where the hell did that come
where did
from?
it come? Yep, exactly. So who knows? They've always got something up their sleeve. We'll see what happens. But that'll do it for us here with the year in review defensive back episode. We appreciate y'all tuning in. We just got one more of these. I'm sure y'all know where this is going. We're talking about special teams, and that'll be one hell of an episode. So
Long
stay tuned.
snappers. Let's go.
Stay tuned for that. We appreciate y'all tuning in. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for all of our content over at InsideNebraska.com and the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. We'll be back next time.